The morning I walked into Porter and Associates and found 3 of our best employees cleaning out their desks, I knew something was terribly wrong. Our family construction business had weathered 40 years of ups and downs, but I'd never seen such a look of defeat on our workers' faces. "Mrs. Porter," Jenny, our office manager, said quietly as she packed her personal items, "we're really sorry it has to end this way." I stared at her in confusion. "End what way? Jenny, what's going on?" Before I share this shocking experience, please show your support with a like and subscribe. Comment your location below. My name is Margaret Porter. I'm 58 years old, and I never imagined my own brother would try to destroy everything our father built. That morning, as I stood watching our employees pack their belongings, I felt like I was living in a nightmare. The problem person at the center of this disaster was my younger brother, Daniel Porter. At 54, Daniel had always lived in the shadow of our family business, working as our operations manager, but never quite accepting that Dad had left the company to both of us equally. Daniel was charming when he wanted to be, with silver hair and an easy smile that made people trust him instantly. But underneath that friendly exterior was a man who'd grown increasingly bitter about what he saw as my controlling leadership style. Daniel told us about the financial problems, Jenny continued, her voice barely above a whisper. He said the company might not make it through the month because of some recent decisions that didn't work out. My heart sank. Financial problems? We'd had our best quarter in years. When I got home that evening, I was grateful to find my daughter, Sarah Porter, waiting in my kitchen. At 32, Sarah had inherited her grandfather's practical nature and her mother's determination. She worked as an accountant for another firm, but had always been my sounding board for business decisions. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she looked up from her laptop with concerned brown eyes. "Mom, you look terrible. What happened?" I collapsed into the chair across from her and explained about the employees leaving. Sarah's expression grew darker with each detail. "That doesn't make sense," Sarah said, closing her laptop with a sharp click. "I reviewed your quarterly reports last month. The business is thriving. Why would Uncle Daniel tell people it's failing?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Rebecca Martinez, my closest friend, and the person who'd helped me navigate every major crisis in my adult life. Rebecca owned a small restaurant downtown and had been my confidant for over 20 years. Her voice was tight with concern. "Margaret, I need to talk to you. Can I come over?" "Of course. Sarah's here too." 20 minutes later, Rebecca sat at my kitchen table, her usually perfect black hair showing signs of stress. She'd clearly rushed over, still wearing her restaurant apron. "I heard something today that I think you need to know," Rebecca began, glancing between Sarah and me. "One of my regular customers is married to Tom Jenkins, your electrician." She mentioned that Tom was looking for new work because Porter and Associates was going under. Sarah leaned forward. "Going under? Mom's business just had its best quarter ever." Rebecca nodded grimly. "That's what I thought. But here's the thing, Margaret. She said Tom heard it directly from Daniel. According to her, Daniel's been telling people that you've been making erratic decisions that are driving the company into the ground." The room fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Erratic decisions?" I finally managed. "What erratic decisions?" "She mentioned something about you expanding too fast, taking on projects you couldn't handle, and refusing to listen to Daniel's advice about scaling back." Sarah's face flushed with anger. "That's completely backwards. Mom's been conservative with every expansion. She researches everything to death before making any major moves." I thought about the past few months. It was true that Daniel and I had disagreed about some decisions. He'd wanted us to stick with small residential jobs, while I'd pushed for us to bid on larger commercial projects. But those bigger contracts had been incredibly successful, bringing in more profit than we'd seen in years. "There's more," Rebecca said reluctantly. "According to this woman, Daniel's been presenting himself as the voice of reason, trying to save the company from your questionable judgment." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My own brother, the man I'd trusted with half of our family legacy, was systematically destroying my reputation with our employees and in the community. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Mom, we need to figure out what Daniel's really up to. This isn't just gossip or a misunderstanding. He's deliberately sabotaging you." I looked at the faces of the two women who meant everything to me, and I realized that what I'd discovered about Daniel's lies was just the beginning. As I prepared to dig deeper into my brother's deception, I had no idea how much worse things were about to get, and that's when the pattern snapped into place. The next morning, I made a decision that went against every instinct I had about confrontation. Instead of calling Daniel or storming into the office, I decided to observe him first. I needed to understand the scope of what he was doing before I acted. I arrived at the office an hour earlier than usual, using my key to slip in through the back entrance. Our company occupied a converted warehouse with Daniel's office on one side of the main floor and mine on the other. I settled into my office with the door cracked, waiting. Daniel arrived at his usual time, and within minutes, I heard him on the phone. His voice carried across the open workspace, and what I heard made my blood run cold. "Listen, Jim, I know Margaret's been your contact for years, but I'm telling you as her business partner, she's not making sound decisions right now." There was a pause. "The Henderson project? That was all her pushing us into something we weren't equipped for. We barely broke even, and that's not the kind of risk we can afford to take again." I gripped my coffee cup so hard I thought it might shatter. The Henderson project had been one of our most profitable jobs in 5 years. We'd made a 30% profit margin, and Jim Henderson had already recommended us to 2 other developers. Daniel continued, his voice taking on a tone I'd never heard before, smooth and convincing. "What I'm suggesting is that you work directly with me on future projects. I've got the experience to keep us stable, and frankly, Margaret's been resistant to my input lately. I think the stress of running the business might be getting to her." I sat frozen, listening to my brother systematically poison our relationship with one of our biggest clients. This wasn't just gossip or venting frustration. This was a calculated campaign to undermine me. When Daniel finally hung up, I forced myself to wait another hour before confronting him. I needed to be calm, strategic. "Daniel," I said, walking into his office as casually as I could manage. "I wanted to talk about the Henderson project. Jim seemed really pleased with the outcome." Daniel's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Oh, yes, good project. Though I think we pushed our timeline a bit too aggressively. Could have been smoother." "Really? I thought we came in ahead of schedule and under budget." He leaned back in his chair, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never noticed before, something calculating. "Margaret, can I be honest with you? I've been concerned about some of the directions you've been pushing the company lately. The rapid expansion, taking on projects that stretch our capabilities. I think we need to have a serious conversation about the future of this business." I stared at my brother, this man I'd worked alongside for 15 years, and realized I was looking at a stranger. "What kind of conversation?" "I think it might be time to consider restructuring our partnership, maybe having one clear decision-maker instead of this collaborative approach that's been causing confusion with our employees and clients." The audacity took my breath away. He was actually proposing to push me out of my own company, while making it sound like he was doing me a favor. And you think you should be that decision maker? Daniel spread his hands in a gesture that was probably meant to look reasonable. I think my approach has been more measured, more sustainable. You've got to admit, Margaret, you can be impulsive. I left the office without another word, my hands shaking with rage. By the time I got home, Sarah was already there, having used her spare key. She took one look at my face and immediately put on the kettle. What happened? I told her everything, word for word. Sarah listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each detail. Mom, he's been planning this. This isn't some sudden power grab. He's been systematically building a case against you with your own clients and employees. But why? The question that had been torturing me all morning finally spilled out. We've been successful. The business is thriving. Why would he want to destroy that? Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said, Maybe that's exactly the problem. Maybe he can't stand that your ideas, your expansion plans, your vision have been so successful. Maybe he's always resented being the junior partner in a business that bears both your names equally. That evening, Rebecca came by without being asked. She'd brought Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine, clearly prepared for a long conversation. I made some discreet inquiries today, she said without preamble. 3 of my regular customers have connections to your business world. Margaret, Daniel has been talking to people for months. This isn't recent. What do you mean? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. One of them mentioned that Daniel approached her husband about potentially investing in a new electrical contracting business. This was back in January. He pitched it as a more conservative alternative to Porter & Associates, which he said was taking on too much risk under current management. Sarah set down her wineglass hard enough to make it ring. He's been planning to start a competing business? Using your client relationships and employee connections? Rebecca nodded grimly. It looks that way. And Margaret, there's something else. The same woman mentioned that Daniel had asked about the process for dissolving business partnerships. He wanted to know how assets would be divided if one partner wanted to buy out the other. The room went quiet. I felt like I was learning about the secret life of someone who'd been living in my house, working beside me, sharing family dinners with me, all while plotting to destroy everything we'd built together. There's more, Rebecca said gently. I think he's been timing this. Several people mentioned that Daniel seemed particularly concerned about your decision-making right around the time you landed the Morrison contract. The Morrison contract. Our biggest job ever. A commercial complex that would set us up financially for years. I'd pursued it aggressively, despite Daniel's objections. When we'd won the bid, it had felt like validation of everything I'd worked toward. He's trying to force me out right when the business is hitting its stride, I said slowly. He wants me to sell my half to him, probably at a reduced price because of all the doubt he's been sowing about my competence. Sarah leaned forward. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I looked at these 2 women who'd become my closest confidants, and I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and confusion were still there, but underneath them, something harder was taking shape. I'm going to find out exactly how far this goes, I said. I need to know which employees he's influenced, which clients he's approached, how much damage he's already done. And then I'm going to decide whether this partnership can be saved or if I need to protect myself and the business from my own brother. Rebecca raised her glass. Whatever you decide, you won't be doing it alone. As we sat there planning my next moves, none of us realized that Daniel had already taken the one step that would force my hand completely. The call that would change everything was coming in less than 12 hours, and after that, there would be no going back. I barely slept that night, my mind churning through everything Rebecca had revealed. Every conversation with Daniel over the past months took on new meaning. His casual questions about client relationships, his sudden interest in our employee handbook, the way he'd started staying late at the office on nights when I went home early. By morning, I'd made a decision. I needed to confront this head-on, but carefully. I couldn't let Daniel know what I'd discovered until I understood the full scope of what he was planning. I arrived at the office early, before Daniel, and started going through our shared files. What I found made my stomach drop. He'd been copying client contact information, employee records, even our pricing strategies. The digital trail was subtle, but clear once I knew what to look for. "You're here early." Daniel's voice from the doorway made me jump. I quickly closed the file I'd been reviewing and turned to face my brother. "Couldn't sleep," I said, studying his face. "Too much on my mind with the Morrison project ramping up." Something flickered in his expression. "About that, Margaret. I think we need to have a serious conversation about the direction this company is heading." Here it was, the moment I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. "What kind of conversation?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Daniel sat down across from my desk, and for a moment, he looked like the little brother I'd grown up with, uncertain and almost vulnerable. Then his expression hardened into something I barely recognized. "I've been talking to some people," he began. "Clients, employees, industry contacts. There's growing concern about your leadership style, Margaret. People are starting to lose confidence." The audacity of it took my breath away. He was sitting there, in the office we'd built together, telling me that people were losing confidence in me because of conversations he had initiated. "Which people?" I asked quietly. "That's not important. What matters is that we need to make some changes before we lose everything we've worked for." He leaned forward, his voice taking on a rehearsed quality. "I think it would be best if you stepped back from day-to-day operations. Maybe we could restructure things so that I handle client relationships and major decisions." I stared at him, this person who shared my DNA but felt like a stranger. "And what would my role be in this new structure?" "You could focus on the financial side, maybe some of the smaller projects." He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Or, if you wanted to pursue other interests, I'd be willing to buy out your share of the business. Fair market value, of course." Fair market value. After he'd spent months undermining me and trying to tank the company's reputation. After he'd been planning to poach our clients and employees. "I need to think about this," I said finally. Relief flooded his face. "Of course, take your time. But Margaret, we really can't let things continue the way they have been." After he left my office, I sat there shaking. Not from fear or sadness, but from pure rage. This was my brother, someone I'd trusted completely, and he was trying to steal everything I'd built. I called Sarah first, then Rebecca, asking them both to meet me for lunch. I needed their perspective before I decided how to handle this. "He actually said that to your face?" Sarah was incredulous when I finished recounting the morning's conversation. "The nerve of that man." Rebecca was more analytical. "He's moving faster than we expected. Something must be pushing his timeline." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Think about it. He's been working on this plan for months, but suddenly he's confronting you directly. Either he's worried you're catching on, or something else is forcing his hand." As if summoned by her words, my phone rang. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. "Margaret, we have a problem." His voice was tight with what sounded like genuine panic. "I just got a call from Morrison Construction. They're threatening to pull the contract." My blood went cold. The Morrison contract was the backbone of our entire business plan for the next 2 years. What happened? They said they heard rumors about internal instability in our company. Someone told them we might not be able to deliver on our commitments due to management issues. I closed my eyes, understanding flooding through me. Someone told them. We need to meet with them immediately. Show them we're a united front. Daniel continued. Can you clear your schedule this afternoon? I'll be there, I said, hanging up and looking at Sarah and Rebecca. Let me guess, Sarah said grimly. The chickens are coming home to roost. He spent so much time telling people I was incompetent that now it's threatening the very contract he wants to steal, I said. The question is, does he genuinely want to save this, or is this part of some larger plan? Rebecca's expression was grim. Margaret, I think you need to consider the possibility that he's orchestrated this too. What if he planted those rumors specifically so he could swoop in and save the day, making himself look like the competent partner? The thought made me feel sick, but I couldn't dismiss it. At this point, I wasn't sure what Daniel wasn't capable of. Whatever his game is, I said, standing up, I'm not going to let him destroy what I built. It's time to stop playing defense. As I headed back to prepare for what might be the most important meeting of my professional life, I had no idea that Daniel had already set in motion the one event that would expose everything and force both of us to show our true colors. The Morrison meeting was scheduled for 3 o'clock, which gave me barely enough time to get back to the office and prepare. When I arrived, Daniel was already there, pacing behind his desk with papers scattered everywhere. Thank God you're here, he said, looking up with what appeared to be genuine relief. I've been going through our project timeline, trying to anticipate every question they might ask. I studied his face carefully. The panic seemed real, but Rebecca's words echoed in my mind. Was this all an elaborate performance? Daniel, we need to talk about something first, I said, closing his office door behind me. How exactly did Morrison hear about our supposed management issues? His jaw tightened slightly. How would I know? Word gets around in this industry. You know how people talk. Do I? Because until recently, we had a solid reputation. No one was questioning our stability or my decision-making abilities outside these walls. Daniel stopped pacing and faced me directly. Margaret, we don't have time for this. Morrison will be here in 40 minutes, and if we lose this contract, it won't matter who said what to whom. We'll both be out of business. There was something in his tone that made me pause. Despite everything, despite all the manipulation and backstabbing, he looked genuinely frightened, not of losing control, but of losing everything. You're right, I said finally. Let's focus on saving the contract first. But Daniel, this conversation isn't over. We spent the next 30 minutes reviewing project details, deadlines, and contingency plans. For a brief moment, it felt like old times when we actually worked as partners instead of adversaries. At exactly 3 o'clock, Tom Morrison arrived, and I could tell immediately that this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. His usual warm demeanor was replaced by a businesslike coldness that made my stomach clench. Tom, thanks for coming in, Daniel said, extending his hand. I know this is unusual, calling a meeting on such short notice. Tom shook his hand briefly, then mine, before taking a seat across from our conference table. Let's cut to the chase. I'm hearing things about your company that concern me. Internal conflicts, erratic management decisions, questions about your ability to deliver on major projects. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but forced myself to remain calm. Tom, I can assure you that any rumors you've heard are completely unfounded. Our company has never been stronger. Is that so? Tom pulled out a folder. Because I've got 3 separate sources telling me that there's been significant disagreement about project directions, missed deadlines due to management confusion, and concerns from your own staff about leadership stability. Daniel leaned forward. Tom, you've worked with us for 5 years. Have we ever missed a deadline? Have we ever delivered subpar work? No, you haven't. Which is why I'm here instead of just pulling the contract outright. But I need to know what's really going on. Is this partnership solid, or am I looking at a company that's about to implode? I glanced at Daniel, who was staring at the table. This was it. The moment of truth. Everything we'd built, everything I'd worked for, hung on what happened in the next few minutes. The truth is, I began, choosing my words carefully. We've had some internal discussions about project approaches. That's normal in any business partnership. But what's not normal is having those private discussions somehow become public knowledge. Tom's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? Daniel's head snapped up. She's not suggesting anything. We're both committed to making this project successful. Actually, I continued, making a decision that would either save us or destroy everything. I am suggesting something. I'm suggesting that someone has been deliberately spreading false information about our company, and I think I know who. The room fell silent. Daniel's face had gone completely white, and Tom was looking back and forth between us like he'd walked into a minefield. Margaret, Daniel said quietly, think very carefully about what you're about to say. But I was done thinking carefully. I was done being manipulated and undermined. Tom, I believe my business partner has been spreading rumors about management instability as part of an attempt to position himself as the sole competent leader of this company. Tom sat back in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. This is exactly what I was afraid of. If you two can't even present a united front in a meeting, how can I trust you to manage a multi-million-dollar project? Daniel stood up abruptly. Margaret, you've just destroyed everything. Congratulations. As Tom gathered his papers and headed for the door, I realized that my gamble had backfired spectacularly. But Daniel's reaction told me everything I needed to know about who was really behind the rumors. Don't worry, Tom, Daniel called after him. I'll handle this situation personally. The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. After Tom left, Daniel and I sat in stunned silence for what felt like an eternity. The conference room suddenly felt enormous and suffocating at the same time. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic outside, but mostly I could hear my own heart pounding. Well, Daniel finally said, his voice eerily calm. That went exactly as I expected it would. As you expected? I turned to face him fully. Daniel, what is that supposed to mean? He was gathering his papers with deliberate precision, not looking at me. It means that your tendency to make accusations without proof just cost us our biggest client. It means that your paranoid delusions about me somehow sabotaging the business have finally reached their logical conclusion. Paranoid delusions? I felt my voice rising. Tom knew details about our private conversations, Daniel. Details that only you and I knew? How do you explain that? I explain it by pointing out that you just accused me of corporate sabotage in front of our most important client. He finally looked up at me, and his expression was ice cold. Do you have any idea what you've done? I know exactly what I've done. I've finally called you out on your manipulation. Daniel stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the parking lot. Margaret, listen to yourself. You sound completely unhinged. This is exactly the kind of erratic behavior that's been concerning everyone. Everyone? Who is everyone, Daniel? Because the only person I hear talking about my supposed erratic behavior is you. He turned around, and for a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe? Or calculation? You think I'm the only one who's noticed? You think Linda and James haven't been worried? My stomach dropped. Linda and James, our key employees, people I trusted completely. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that they've both come to me privately, expressing concerns about your decision-making lately. The rushed deadlines, the sudden project changes, the way you've been… He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. The way you've been acting suspicious of everyone. I felt like the room was spinning. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you had a normal conversation with Linda? When was the last time you didn't question James's project timelines? I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it. Had I been doing that? I thought back to my interactions with our team over the past few weeks. I had been more watchful, more questioning. But that was because I'd sensed something was wrong, not because I was being paranoid. You're twisting everything, I said, but my voice sounded uncertain even to me. Am I? Margaret, I've been covering for you. When Linda mentioned that you seemed stressed and distracted, I told her you were just working through some personal issues. When James said you'd changed 3 project specifications in 1 week, I explained that you were exploring options. I've been protecting you. Protecting me from what? From the consequences of your own behavior. But I can't do it anymore. Not after what just happened with Tom. I sank back into my chair, trying to process what he was saying. Was it possible that I had been acting erratically? The stress of feeling like I was being undermined, the constant second-guessing, the sleepless nights wondering if I was imagining things. Maybe it had affected my work more than I realized. Daniel, I said slowly, if you were really concerned about my behavior, why didn't you come to me directly? Why didn't you say something? I tried, multiple times. But every time I brought up a concern, you accused me of being controlling or manipulative. You made it impossible to have a rational conversation. I thought about our recent interactions, trying to remember his exact words, his tone. Had I been defensive? Had I shut down legitimate concerns because I was so convinced he was working against me? But the information Tom had, I pressed. How did he know about our private discussions? Daniel sat back down across from me, his expression softening slightly. Margaret, Tom has been our client for 5 years. He has contacts throughout the industry. He hears things. When there's tension in a company, people notice. Vendors notice. Subcontractors notice. Other clients notice. So, you're saying it wasn't you? Of course it wasn't me. Why would I sabotage my own business? This company is my livelihood too, Margaret. If it fails, I fail. I stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. But he looked genuinely hurt, genuinely confused by my accusations. Either he was an incredible actor, or I had just made a terrible mistake. What do we do now? I asked quietly. I don't know. Tom's not going to trust us with his project after what he witnessed today. And honestly, I'm not sure I can continue working like this, always wondering when you're going to accuse me of some new betrayal. The weight of what I might have done was settling on my shoulders like a lead blanket. If Daniel was telling the truth, if I really had been acting erratically, then I had just destroyed everything we'd built together based on my own paranoid suspicions. I need to think, I said. I need to figure out what's real and what's in my head. Maybe you should take some time off, Daniel suggested. Get some perspective. I can handle things here for a while. The suggestion should have sounded reasonable, even caring. But something about the way he said it, the slight eagerness in his voice, made alarm bells go off in my head again. Was he genuinely concerned about my well-being, or was this exactly what he'd been maneuvering toward all along? No, I said firmly. I'm not going anywhere. This is my company too, and I'm going to figure out what's really happening here. Daniel's expression hardened again. Then we have a problem, Margaret, because I can't work with someone who doesn't trust me. And clearly, you don't trust me at all. As we stared at each other across the conference table, I realized that everything was about to change, one way or another. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Daniel's words echoed in my head. I can't work with someone who doesn't trust me. The problem was, I didn't know if my distrust was justified intuition or if my mind was playing tricks on me. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady. I need some air. Margaret, wait. But I was already walking out, leaving Daniel sitting alone in the conference room. I grabbed my purse and headed for the parking lot, my thoughts spinning in endless loops. Had I really been making erratic decisions? Was I the problem here? The drive to Sarah's house felt automatic, like my car knew where I needed to go before my conscious mind did. Sarah answered the door in paint-splattered clothes, a brush still in her hand. Margaret, what's wrong? You look terrible. Can I come in? I think I might be losing my mind. Sarah set down her brush immediately and ushered me inside. Her living room smelled like turpentine and coffee, familiar and comforting. I sank onto her couch and found myself telling her everything. The meeting with Tom, Daniel's suggestion that I take time off, the way his voice had sounded just a little too eager when he said it. But maybe he's right, I said, burying my face in my hands. Maybe I am being paranoid. Maybe there's no conspiracy, and I'm just broken somehow. Sarah sat down beside me, her voice gentle but firm. Margaret, you're one of the most level-headed people I know. You built a successful business from nothing. You don't just suddenly become erratic without a reason. But what if the stress finally got to me? What if I'm seeing enemies where there aren't any? Then let's figure that out logically, Sarah said. Tell me about these supposedly erratic decisions Daniel mentioned. I tried to think back over the past few months. Well, there was the Henderson project. I insisted we change suppliers mid-contract because I had concerns about quality. Daniel said it was unnecessary and expensive. Were your concerns valid? Yes, actually. The original supplier's samples were subpar when I tested them more thoroughly. But Daniel made it sound like I was being impulsive. What else? I turned down the Morrison account. Daniel was furious about that one. Said it was too much money to walk away from. Why did you turn it down? I remembered that conversation clearly now. Morrison wanted us to cut corners on safety specifications. It would have saved them money, but potentially put workers at risk. I couldn't do it. Sarah raised an eyebrow. So you made ethical business decisions based on quality and safety concerns, and Daniel framed these as erratic behavior to a client? When she put it like that, my decisions sounded reasonable, even admirable. But doubt still gnawed at me. What if I'm remembering it wrong? What if I really am? Stop! Sarah's voice was sharp. Margaret, listen to yourself. You're second-guessing every instinct you have because someone told you to. That's not like you. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Daniel called me. He's worried about you. Says you've been under a lot of stress. Are you okay? My stomach dropped. He called my mother. Sarah leaned over to read the text. Why would he do that? I don't know. But even as I said it, a cold realization was creeping over me. Unless he's building a narrative, making it look like I'm having some kind of breakdown. The thought terrified me because it felt both paranoid and plausible at the same time. I called Mom immediately, Margaret, honey, Daniel sounded so concerned, Mom said before I could even say hello. He said you've been making some unusual business choices and that you seemed confused during a client meeting today. Mom, what exactly did he say? Well, he mentioned that you've been, what was the phrase? Acting out of character. He said he was worried you might be overwhelmed and that maybe you should consider stepping back from the business for a while. My hands were shaking now. The same phrase, the same suggestion. It couldn't be coincidence. Mom, I need you to listen carefully. Did Daniel ever call you before today? Ever express concerns about me or the business? No, never. Today was the first time. But Margaret, he sounded so genuine, so worried about you. He really cares. What time did he call you? About 20 minutes ago, I think, right after you left his office, he said. I felt sick. 20 minutes ago, I had been driving to Sarah's house, and Daniel had been calling my mother to plant seeds of doubt about my mental state. The calculated nature of it was breathtaking. Mom, I'm fine. Daniel and I are having some business disagreements, but I'm not having a breakdown. Please don't let him convince you otherwise. After I hung up, Sarah was staring at me with a mixture of anger and concern. Margaret, that's not normal behavior. Partners don't call each other's mothers unless there's a real emergency. So, I'm not crazy? No, you're not crazy. But I think Daniel might be more manipulative than you realized. I sat back, trying to process this new information. If Daniel was deliberately trying to undermine me, if he was calling my mother to make me look unstable, then what was his endgame? Did he want me out of the business entirely? My phone rang. It was David. Hey sis, Mom called me. She's worried about you. Said Daniel thinks you might be having some kind of stress-related breakdown? And there it was. Daniel's narrative was already spreading through my family, painting me as unstable, while positioning himself as the concerned, rational partner. It was masterful, really, and utterly ruthless. David, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. David, has Daniel ever called you before? About me? About the business? About anything? There was a pause. Actually, yeah. He called me about 2 weeks ago. Said he was worried about some decisions you were making at work. Asked if I'd noticed you acting differently lately. My stomach dropped. 2 weeks ago. This had been going on for 2 weeks, and I was just now realizing it. What did you tell him? I told him you seemed fine to me. Maybe a little stressed with work, but nothing unusual. Why? Should I have told you he called? I closed my eyes, feeling the full scope of Daniel's campaign against me. David, what exactly did he say 2 weeks ago? He said you'd been making some questionable business choices and that he was concerned about your judgment. He asked if our family had any history of mental health issues. I told him that was none of his business. The phrase hit me like a physical blow. Mental health issues. Daniel wasn't just trying to undermine my professional credibility. He was trying to make my family question my sanity. Margaret, what's going on? David's voice was sharp now, concerned. Daniel is lying to you, to Mom. He's trying to make it look like I'm having some kind of breakdown so he can push me out of the business. That's pretty serious, sis. Are you sure? The doubt in his voice stung, but I understood it. Daniel's story was compelling, and he'd been planting seeds for weeks. Of course, my family would be confused. David, I need you to think. Have I seemed unstable to you? Confused? Making erratic decisions in my personal life? Another pause. No, you've seemed like yourself. Maybe a little more frustrated with work than usual, but that's it. That's because I've been frustrated with Daniel. He's been undermining me at work, making decisions without consulting me. And now I know he's been calling our family to make me look crazy. Sarah was watching me intently, and I could see the anger building in her expression. She'd heard enough of my side of the conversation to understand what was happening. "I don't know what to think," David said finally. "This is all really confusing." "I know it is. But David, please don't let Daniel convince you that I'm losing my mind. I'm not. I'm dealing with a business partner who's trying to gaslight me and my entire family." After I hung up, Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "He called your brother 2 weeks ago," she said finally. "This isn't some spontaneous reaction to a business disagreement. This is a planned campaign." I nodded, feeling a cold clarity settling over me. "He's been building a case against me, making me look unstable to my employees, my family, probably our clients too. The question is why? What does he gain by pushing you out?" I thought about our business, our client list, our upcoming contracts. Everything. If I'm deemed unfit to run the company, if my own family thinks I'm having a breakdown, then Daniel gets full control. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Hope you're feeling better. Maybe we should schedule a meeting with our attorney tomorrow to discuss some structural changes to the business. For your own peace of mind." Sarah read it over my shoulder. "He's moving fast now." "Because he knows I'm starting to figure it out," I said, staring at the message. The casual tone, the fake concern, the suggestion that I needed structural changes for my peace of mind. It was all so calculated. But there was something else in that text that made my blood run cold. Daniel had never mentioned our attorney to me recently, which meant, "Because he knows I'm starting to figure it out," I said, staring at the message. The casual tone, the fake concern, the suggestion that I needed structural changes for my peace of mind. It was all so calculated. But there was something else in that text that made my blood run cold. Daniel had never mentioned our attorney to me recently, which meant he'd already been in contact with him, without me. "Sarah, he's already talked to our lawyer. That's why he's so confident about scheduling a meeting tomorrow. He's been preparing for this." Sarah stood up and started pacing around my kitchen. "Okay, so what's your next move? You can't just walk into that meeting blind." Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was David calling back. "I've been thinking about what you said," he started without preamble. "And I remembered something. When Daniel called me 2 weeks ago, he asked a lot of questions about Dad's will, about how the business inheritance was structured. At the time, I thought he was just being thorough, but now it looks like he was researching how to push me out legally," I finished. "Yeah, and there's something else. He asked me not to mention our conversation to you. Said it would upset you unnecessarily while you were going through this difficult time. I should have called you right away." I felt a mix of relief and frustration. Relief that David was starting to see the truth. Frustration that Daniel had been manipulating my family for weeks. "David, I need you to do something for me. Can you call Mom and tell her what you just told me? She needs to hear this from you." "Already planned to. I'm driving over there now. This whole thing doesn't sit right with me anymore." After David hung up, I felt some of the weight lifting from my shoulders. Having my family start to see Daniel's manipulation was crucial, but I still had the immediate problem of tomorrow's meeting. "I need to get ahead of this," I told Sarah. "I can't let Daniel control the narrative with our attorney." "Can you call the lawyer directly? Schedule your own meeting first?" I was already scrolling through my contacts. James has been our family attorney for 15 years. He knew my father, helped set up the business structure. If anyone can see through Daniel's games, it's him. I dialed James's number, hoping he'd answer even though it was getting late. "Margaret, this is unexpected. I was just reviewing some documents Daniel sent over earlier today." My heart sank. What kind of documents? Well, he's expressed some concerns about your recent decision-making and wants to discuss modifying the business partnership agreement. He mentioned you've been under a lot of stress lately. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. James, I need to ask you something directly. Ask you. In all the years you've known me, have I ever struck you as someone who makes impulsive or erratic business decisions? There was a pause. No, Margaret. You've always been very methodical, very careful. Honestly, some of what Daniel described doesn't sound like you at all. Because it's not me. Daniel has been undermining my authority at work, and now he's trying to manipulate our family and our business relationships. I think he's planning to use tomorrow's meeting to push me out of my own company. That's a very serious accusation. I know it is, but James, think about this. Why would Daniel send you documents about my supposed instability without including me in the conversation? Why wouldn't he suggest we all meet together first to discuss whatever concerns he has? Another pause, longer this time. You raise a good point. Proper protocol would be to have both partners present for any discussion about partnership modifications. Exactly. And the decisions he's calling erratic? I can document every single one of them. They were all sound business choices that Daniel disagreed with, not signs of mental instability. Sarah was giving me an encouraging nod, and I felt my confidence growing. Margaret, I think we need to have a conversation before tomorrow's meeting. Can you come in first thing in the morning? Bring any documentation you have about these business decisions Daniel mentioned. Absolutely. And James? I want you to know that my brother David is going to be calling you as well. Daniel contacted my family members to tell them I was having some kind of breakdown, but David is starting to see through it. I see. This is becoming quite complicated. Let me review Daniel's documents more carefully tonight, and we'll sort this out tomorrow morning. After I hung up, Sarah was smiling for the first time all evening. You handled that perfectly. You didn't sound defensive or emotional, just factual. Because the facts are on my side, I said, feeling more sure of myself than I had in weeks. Daniel may have gotten a head start on his manipulation campaign, but he made one crucial mistake. What's that? He forgot that the people who know me best can tell the difference between Margaret having a breakdown and Margaret being angry about something legitimate. My phone buzzed with another text, this time from David. Just talk to Mom. She's furious that Daniel called her without talking to you first. She wants to have dinner with you this weekend to hear your side of everything. I showed the message to Sarah, who grinned. Your family's starting to rally around you. Yeah, but I still have to get through tomorrow's meeting with Daniel, and now that he knows I'm pushing back, he's going to get more desperate. As if summoned by my words, my phone rang again. This time, it was Daniel. Margaret, I heard you called James tonight. I hope you're not planning to make tomorrow's meeting more difficult than it needs to be. I'm only trying to help. The fake concern in his voice made my skin crawl, but I kept my tone level. Daniel, if you were trying to help, you would have talked to me directly instead of going behind my back to my family and our attorney. I was worried about confronting you directly. You haven't been yourself lately. I've been exactly myself. The only thing that's changed is that I finally figured out what you've been doing. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I'll see you tomorrow morning, Margaret. I hope you'll be reasonable. But something in his tone told me that tomorrow's meeting was going to be anything but reasonable. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept replaying Daniel's voice saying, I hope you'll be reasonable. The implied threat underneath those words made my stomach churn. I finally gave up on sleep around 5 in the morning and made coffee, trying to organize my thoughts before the meeting. Sarah found me at the kitchen table surrounded by papers at 6:30. You've been up all night, haven't you? She said, pouring herself a cup from the pot I'd made. I couldn't stop thinking about what Daniel might try today. He sounded different on that call last night. Less fake concerned, more calculated. That's actually a good thing, Sarah said, sitting across from me. It means his mask is slipping. People will start to see his true intentions. My phone rang, and I was surprised to see it was James calling so early. Margaret, I'm glad I caught you before you left for the office. I spent most of the night going through Daniel's documentation, and I need to ask you some direct questions. Of course. What did you find? The decisions he's citing as evidence of your instability are actually quite sound from a business perspective. The marketing budget reallocation, the vendor switch, the new client outreach strategy. These all show good judgment, not erratic behavior. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. So, you can see what he's really doing? I'm starting to, yes, but Margaret, I need you to be completely honest with me. Has Daniel been involved in the day-to-day financial operations of the business? More than he should be, honestly. I gave him access to most of our accounts because I trusted him. Why? There was a pause that made my blood run cold. Because some of these budget concerns he's raising don't match the actual numbers I'm seeing in your quarterly reports. Either your books are wrong, or Daniel is presenting false information. Sarah was watching my face intently as I processed what James was telling me. James, are you saying Daniel might have been manipulating the financial data? I'm saying there are discrepancies that need immediate investigation. When you come in this morning, bring your personal copies of all financial statements from the past 6 months. Don't rely on anything Daniel might have prepared. After I hung up, Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. This is bigger than we thought, isn't it? Much bigger. If Daniel has been falsifying financial information, this isn't just about him undermining my authority. This could be fraud. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Can't sleep? Keep thinking about Daniel's call to Mom yesterday. Something felt really off about the whole thing. Are you okay? I showed the message to Sarah, feeling grateful that at least David's instincts were kicking in. Your family is starting to wake up to what's happening, Sarah said. But will it be enough? Daniel has had months to plant seeds of doubt about my mental state. Even if James can prove the financial irregularities, Daniel could claim I was the one who made the errors due to my supposed breakdown. At 8 o'clock, I walked into the office building feeling like I was heading into battle. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt endless, and when the doors opened, I could see Daniel was already in the conference room with James. Through the glass walls, I watched Daniel gesturing emphatically, clearly trying to solidify his narrative before I arrived. James looked uncomfortable, occasionally glancing toward the door as if waiting for me to rescue him from the conversation. When I entered the conference room, Daniel's expression shifted instantly to that fake concern I'd grown to despise. Margaret, you look tired. Are you sure you're up for this discussion today? I'm perfectly fine, Daniel. Let's get started. James cleared his throat and opened the folder in front of him. I've reviewed all the documentation both of you provided, and I have some serious concerns about the discrepancies I'm seeing. Daniel leaned forward, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he'd been using with everyone. James, I think what you're seeing reflects the kind of confused decision-making I've been worried about. Margaret hasn't been tracking things properly. Actually, Daniel, James said, his voice steady but firm. The confusion seems to be in your reports, not Margaret's records. Can you explain why your summary of the 3rd quarter shows a 15% revenue decline when the actual bank statements show only a 3% drop? The color drained from Daniel's face, and for the first time in months, I saw him truly caught off guard. There must have been a calculation error. I've been so worried about Margaret that maybe I made some mistakes myself. but James wasn't letting him off that easily. This would require multiple calculation errors across several different accounts, Daniel. And they all happen to support your theory that Margaret's decisions are damaging the business. Daniel's eyes darted between James and me, and I could practically see him scrambling for a new strategy. When he spoke again, his voice had an edge I'd never heard before. You know what, James? I think Margaret has gotten to you too. She's very convincing when she wants to be, very manipulative. This is exactly the kind of thing I was worried about. The room fell silent, and I realized that Daniel had just made his biggest mistake yet. By attacking James directly, he'd shown his true colors to the one person whose opinion could make or break his plan. But as I watched Daniel's expression shift from panic to cold determination, I realized he wasn't done fighting. And something told me his next move was going to be even more desperate. James set down his pen and looked directly at Daniel, his professional demeanor hardening into something I'd never seen before. The afternoon light streaming through the conference room windows cast sharp shadows across the polished table, and the silence stretched uncomfortably long. Daniel, I've been your family's accountant for 12 years, James said finally, his voice carrying a weight that made Daniel shift in his chair. I've never once compromised my professional integrity, and I'm not about to start now. Daniel's jaw tightened, and when he spoke, the mask of concern had completely fallen away. Then you're making a mistake, James. Margaret's been erratic for months. Ask anyone who works here. Ask Sarah what she's witnessed. I have asked Sarah, James replied calmly, opening another folder. She provided me with detailed notes about every meeting she's attended, every decision she's documented. Her records corroborate Margaret's version of events completely. The blood rushed to Daniel's face, a deep red creeping up his neck. Sarah's been here less than a year. She doesn't understand the bigger picture. She understands enough to keep accurate records, James said, sliding a stack of papers across the table. Unlike these reports you've been circulating to employees. I watched Daniel scan the documents, seeing his own fabrications laid out in black and white alongside the actual financial data. His hands trembled slightly as he flipped through the pages, and I felt an unexpected pang of sadness watching my brother's desperation unfold. You don't understand the pressure I've been under, Daniel said, his voice cracking. Watching Margaret make decision after decision that I knew were wrong. Seeing our family business heading toward disaster and not being able to stop it. But the business isn't heading toward disaster, I said quietly. We're actually performing better than last year. You know that, Daniel. You've seen the real numbers. Daniel's eyes met mine across the table, and for a moment I saw something raw and vulnerable there. You never listened to me, Margaret. Every idea I bring up, every suggestion I make, you dismiss it. You've been shutting me out for years. The accusation hit harder than I expected because there was truth in it. I had been dismissing Daniel's ideas, but not because they were bad. I'd been dismissing them because of how he presented them, with that condescending tone that made me feel like he thought I was incompetent. You're right, I admitted, and Daniel's eyes widened in surprise. I have been shutting you out. But Daniel, the way you approach these conversations makes me feel like you don't respect my judgment at all. James cleared his throat gently. Perhaps we should focus on how to move forward constructively. Daniel stared down at the papers in front of him, his shoulders sagging. I've made a mess of everything, haven't I? The employees, the reports, attacking you both? He looked up at James with genuine remorse. I'm sorry. That was completely out of line. Yes, it was, James said, but his tone had softened. The question now is what you're going to do about it. The weight of months of tension seemed to settle over the conference room like dust. Outside, I could hear the familiar sounds of our employees wrapping up their workday, and I realized that tomorrow we'd have to face them together, somehow rebuild what Daniel's campaign had damaged. "The employees need to hear the truth," I said. "From both of us. Together." Daniel nodded slowly, running his hands through his hair. "I don't even know where to start. Some of the things I said about you, Margaret, they were—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "They were hurtful," I finished. "But we're family, and this is our business. We can fix this, but only if we're honest with each other going forward." James began organizing his papers, a sign that he considered the financial crisis resolved. "I'll prepare a corrected summary of the company's actual performance. You'll both need to sign off on it before it goes to the employees." As we prepared to leave the conference room, Daniel hesitated at the door. "Margaret, I want you to know that I never wanted to hurt the business. I just felt so—" He struggled for words. "Powerless?" I suggested, and he nodded. "We need to figure out how to work together better," I said. "Maybe we should have been having these conversations months ago, before it got this far." Walking back toward our offices, I felt the exhaustion of months of conflict finally catching up with me. But underneath it was something else. A cautious hope that maybe Daniel and I could find our way back to being the team we used to be. The next morning would bring difficult conversations with employees, and rebuilding trust would take time. But for the first time in months, I felt like my brother and I were finally on the same side again.